Hello and a warm welcome to everybody joining us for session 2 on day 2 of our 7th annual ISNTD Festival. It's been an amazing journey so far. We had a wonderful opening day yesterday with the WHO, many entrants and participants, excellent sessions looking at the focus on the community itself, different communications modalities ranging from the film, but to data, predictive capacities in AI, all sorts of amazing different kind of bandwidths within the communication spectrum. So we were delighted with that. We've had an amazingly, robust Q&A session just now with the Ministry of Health Kenya, Unlimit Health, and various stakeholders within the schistosomosis community there, and a range of work that they're undertaking there at the University of Munich as well. Brilliant session. It's very interesting with some of the pressing needs there were at the end were to try and bring some kind of channels, open channels for social mobilization, messaging, and the need for creatives, right? So we're really happy and honored to have this session. It's a nice segue into this session, emerging creative voices in neglected tropical diseases, art, written word, and film. We are absolutely delighted. We've had an amazing input from loads and loads of different people. It's all up on our showcase. I wish we had a whole day to go through all of those, but that's what the showcase is there for everybody to have a look at. We are joined today by Obed Imbahafi at the University of Kigali in Rwanda. Obed had put forward 10 poems. He's written articles in terms of a very powerful article actually on the double burden of climate change in NTDs. Also, there's a really interesting film that he's put forward in terms of youth storytellers, and the motion team would come together to put that. He's written he put an audio file forward. We've also added that to our showcase, and the film in almost written form, which is a really powerful story, and it really showed the emerging kind of creativity that's coming there. So thank you for that, Obed. So Obed will be coming up first. Then we have Ireoluwa Adegoke from the 5th year medical student at the University of Ibadan. And Ireoluwa has put forward 4 pieces to us, primarily the Addressing the Elephant. It's a digital art, stunningly done. And I really would, ask all of you to have a look at that on our showcase. It's brilliant. It's superb, highly creative, and something that really needs to have a look at, that we all need to have a look at. We're ending the session with a really interesting film with one of the most upcoming rising stars in terms of directors from Ethiopia, Eyerusalem, Kassahun, and also presenting with Dr. Dereje Wonde from the Bahir University and 5S Foundation, as well as involvement at the Brighton and Sussex Medical School here in the UK. Agony of the Night, in terms of scabies within Ethiopia, well worth a lot. We'll be showing that at the end of the session as well. So I think that's enough from me. My name's Kamran Rafiq. I should have said at the beginning in case you've just joined the session. I'm one of the co-founders and communications director here at the ISNTD. What I would ask is all the lovely audience, I have to do this at the beginning because all the rooms change, is to put your name, country and organization and say hello. It makes for a far more immersive feel to the proceedings, and it's very important. So I think we'd be very honored if you could do that for us. Say hi with your name, country, organization. There's a live tweet feed on as well at ISNTD_press. Do use the hashtag ISNTD Festival. That's the housekeeping out of the way. I think that's enough from me, and I think we're going to move directly to the first speaker. So welcome to the floor, one of the most prolific entrants that we've had in terms of different, it's creativity. That's what we're talking about. So over to you, Obed. So Obed, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Obed Imbahafi from Rwanda, currently doing my bachelor's in business IT in University of Kigali, but with a great interest in global health and advocacy. So I use writing, storytelling, and poetry in doing that. And I would like to start my presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the 7th ICNTD Festival. I am Obed Imbahafi from Rwanda, and I'm just going to talk about creative voices and their role in creating awareness for neglected tropical diseases. So, I am a Rwandan youth interested in global health, especially neglected tropical diseases, and I use writing, storytelling, and poetry to raise awareness about NTDs. I've written numerous articles and stories about NTDs, and they have been published at national and international level. So, for me, I believe in creativity to end neglected tropical diseases. That's why I believe that if creative voices are harnessed enough, they can bring attention to neglected tropical diseases and drive a positive change. So, allow me to share with you how I joined the fight against neglected tropical diseases, as I do not have background in health sector. But I have a background and I have great interest in intellectual property laws, and it all started in September 2020 when I was doing a specialized course on promoting access to healthcare technology and innovations at the World Intellectual Property Organization. And it was all about the intersection between intellectual property laws, health, public health, and trade. So, in that course, I ran that there is a group of diseases that affect the world's most poorest people, and those diseases are called neglected tropical diseases. And I later got to find out that they are called neglected because they receive little attention and funding compared to other diseases. So, as I continued reading the learning materials, I was shocked to see that between 2000 and 2010, there were new 850 new therapeutic products registered, and among them, only 37 were registered for NTDs. It means only 4%. So, despite the huge number affected by those diseases, so this sparked my curiosity, and I started reading more about NTDs, and I found out a gap, and that's when I decided to start writing and publishing about neglected tropical diseases. And later in that year, I participated in the World NTD Day storytelling competition, and I emerged the winner in the writing category. So, I joined forces with others in the fight against NTDs, like I'm here today with the ICNTD. I also advocate Think to combat NTDs and youth combating NTDs as a youth champion. So, this is not the end of the road to advocate. I'm still committed to continue my work to raise awareness about NTDs because the fight is not over. Yeah, we are still having more to do. So, kindly let me share with you a secret that helped me to keep fighting neglected tropical diseases. So, the secret for me, it's not a big one. It is that whenever I hear or read that NTDs affect more than 1.7 billion people in the world, I don't just understand those people as number or cases, but a life, a soul with so much grace. So I do not work hard to decrease the number of cases, but I work hard to save life, to save lives. I work hard to save souls. Those are the people who have a great future. So this is the secret that keeps me on the fight against neglected tropical diseases. So allow me to share with you some of my works on the NTDs. This is the latest one. It is called From Suffering to Hope. It is a collection of 10 poems on neglected tropical diseases. So it's composed by 10 poems. The first 3 poems are about suffering, and the remaining 7 brings hope. So it's a call to action for individuals and communities to work hard to eliminate NTDs and build a healthier world. While I was choosing this title, From Suffering to Hope, I wanted to reflect the suffering that individuals and communities impacted by NTDs often experience. Suffering is a common experience in people impacted by NTDs, but hope can emerge through advocacy, through raising awareness, and access to effective treatments and prevention efforts. So this was the idea behind this title, From Suffering to Hope. And this is one of the poems that are in. It is called The Lost Sight. It talks about a man who once had the gift of sight, but liver blindness blinded him. It keeps explaining the sorrow and suffering of this man, but at the end, it shows his new reality. It shows how he refused to bow down to his adversity and found new ways to live his life. And this is a reason for all of us to never let any challenge make us fall. We have to triumph over any long. It means we have to triumph over NTDs. We are capable of doing that. It shows suffering, but also emerging hope inside. So this is the latest work. This is also another work, which is the power of children in fighting neglected tropical diseases. This won the first award in the World NTD Storytelling Competition. And it's a story from Grandpa's Diary, which shows where and how he encountered NTDs and his mitigation measures as a teacher in the DRC. So this was designed for children and youth. So it explains about NTDs deeply and led the children to discuss ways they can help to fight NTDs. And this is another work of mine, which is an artistic work, which shows the collaboration, the power of collaboration between countries and global communities, and how this can be an effective way to end neglected tropical diseases. So you can ask yourself, why did he choose storytelling and poetry? There are numerous mediums to use while raising awareness. Why those two? So let me start from poetry. I choose poetry because it creates empathy. So it helps people to understand what it is like to live with NTDs. And apart from that, it helps to raise awareness. It helps to dispel the myth and misconception about these diseases, and it inspires people to act. When people are sharing their personal experience, are sharing their emotions, people are touched, and they can take an action to treat and prevent NTDs. They can start to donate their money. They can start to volunteer their time, and they can start to advocate for better policies and programs just to make sure NTDs are well addressed. But beyond all, poems and stories are memorable. They are very easy to understand, they are very easy to be memorized, and they can be retold, hence creating further awareness. And the reason why I choose storytelling is that it helps to break down complex and thick concepts and makes the stories accessible to a wider audience. And makes the content more relatable. People tend to understand stories or to like listening to stories more than facts and figures. Yeah, that's why for me, poetry and storytelling are one of the best creative approaches to raise awareness about NTDs as they engage people on an emotional level and inspire them to take action. So there are challenges we face as youth in this fight against NTDs. The first one is limited access to resources and funding, and we also lack recognition from and support from established institutions. And while I'm still on this point, allow me to extend my appreciation to ISNTD for giving us a platform as youth like this today. Uh, when they are planning a festival and they think that youth voices are very crucial to this fight, this is something good as we are going to bring creative voices in this fight and help to eliminate neglected tropical diseases. And another challenge we face as youth, we need a better life, we need a better future, so we have to work. And sometimes it is difficult to balance advocacy and activism with education and employment. So we as if we do not talk about challenges, but we also look on the possible solution to those challenges we are facing. And here there are three: we can build networks and coalition. We can leverage social media and online platforms to connect with peers and supporters like we are doing today at ISNTD Festival. And we can work to build partnership with established organizations and institutions. So as I'm heading to the end of my presentation, allow me to also talk about youth creativity in fighting NTDs. You know, NTDs affect more than 1.7 billion people in the world who are mostly poor. And we all know and we always say that healthcare is a fundamental right, yet still many lack it. So youth creativity can play a great role in fighting these diseases, in ensuring that healthcare is fundamental right and achieve equitable health for all. We have hundreds of ways we can do that, but I choose to talk about the three one today. We are very creative. We can create innovative low-cost solutions to address NTDs. We can design and implement community-led initiative, and that's today we all use social media. We can share educational materials there on social media and other public channels. And creative movements are very essential in this fight because of two things I'm going to talk about here below. Creative movement have ability to raise awareness and increase public engagement in the fight against NTDs. For example, I also want to thank ISNTD for this opportunity of bringing the festival online. When it was in person, it was difficult for many people to attend. But today it's online. This is a creative movement. This is a creative action. It is online. Everyone, everywhere around the world can access the content, can access the festival, and this will raise awareness to a higher level and increase the public engagement. And the last one is that creative movement have a potential to generate new ideas and solutions to the challenges faced by researchers and healthcare professionals in fighting neglected tropical diseases. So as I conclude, allow me to ask governments and well-established organizations to empower the youth so as they can use their creativity and make a difference in fighting neglected tropical diseases. I know they are able, they are capable of doing that. And if they do this together, we can create a world where everyone has access to healthcare and a chance to lead a and dignified life. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope at the end of the session we have an opportunity to ask questions and interacting more. Thank you a lot.
Obed, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. You're one of the most prolific entrants we've ever had in our festival, the 7th annual one. And I'm talking about the 10 poems, I'm talking about your article, the film in written form, the audio files. And I think you hit the nail completely on the head in terms of some of these challenges and beautifully put the solutions to that. I would dare say that you've got a huge ally in Dr. Gabriella Stern, who's the current head of communications at the WHO. She opened our festival yesterday, and they are really want to engage with the youth. After this session, we've actually got the SADC Youth Health Cluster, the South African Development Community's Head of Health Cluster for Youth, 16 African countries, Vivian Joseph, and we've got Kamala Dixon, who's the head of the Pan-African Arts Culture Cluster within SADC Youth, and we're going to be talking about changing narratives. But I think, so that's be a wonderful flow into that as well. But I think you raised some absolutely huge points, and we take our hat off to you for that. And we totally echo the point that you made about being online. And that's what we've tried to do with this and open access to everyone. We've recorded this. We're going to put it across the socials after to get you that recognition that you absolutely deserve. And so thank you very, very much for that. And you're getting some great feedback from the audience on point. Edna Zafado from Iran, Professor Majid Fashi Harandi, thanks for the very nice presentation. Dr. Mariam Keshiniro from State House Abuja in Nigeria, Dr. Bio Garang from the South Sudan, representing leprosy and NTD's organizations within South Sudan, Professor James Mwanza from the Zambia, Dr. Sunny Mante from Ghana, Patrick Wilson from the NIHR, who had actually, and saying very proud, they funded the film that we're going to show later with Dr. Wonde and Eyerusalem in terms of the director of that film, Agony of the Night. So some great, and from Cote d'Ivoire, Dr. Koulibaly, from Northampton here in the UK, Lola Abe, from Geneva, Flora Charbonnier, hi there Flora, from Infinity Communications, lots and lots of people, Jam from the 5S Foundation in the Brighton and Sussex Medical Schools. A big shout out, and please give your names and keep putting your questions through and everything. We love that. Everybody loved that presentation, Obed, so thank you very, very much for that. Before we move to the next speaker, Ireoluwa, we did mention that we had a lot of entries, and I wanted to give a shout out to Eji Elisha Enebulele. He's a molecular parasitologist and children's book author in the Texas Biomedical Research Center. His book, the Ouch Jab children's book, and also a game called No More Schisto, in terms of a kind of gaming approach to female genital schisto, quite a stigma-heavy NTD there. Short stories were sent in by Oluwasem Osinero from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, a public health specialist, and another med student in training at Birmingham University, Joanna Egwuda, had put in some short stories as well. And I'm sure later on, not now, but later on in a few months, I'm going to be away from Saturday the 18th to the end of April, but post-April, we're going to be making some special ISNTD Connect sessions with everybody and getting into this deeply. So thank you very, very much for that, Obed, indeed. I think we're going to move now to the second speaker that we've got. So a round of applause for Obed. And I think we're going to move to the second speaker. I'm proud to put forward, offer the floor to a 50-year medical student at the University of Ibadan, Ireoluwa Adegoke, addressing the elephant. Over to you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ireoluwa Adegoke, 50th medical student, and I'm an illustrator. Today, I'll be discussing what it is like to be an emerging creative in the NTD space, and I would also be doing this by using my artwork. All right. So the elephant in the room, it was born out of the COVID-19. Without the COVID-19 pandemic, I probably would not have been able to make this illustration. So this illustration was a submission for the digital category at the Global Youth Storytelling Award competition that held in 2020 and 2021. So we were asked to tell a compelling story about a neglected tropical disease using any form of media we preferred. And I picked illustrations because at the time, so please can I move to the next slide? So because at the time I was experimenting with trying to um, break down or trying to explain complex emotions in one picture. Please can I move to the next slide? Yes. So I was at a stage of making illustrations where I was trying to express complex emotions in one picture. And the phrase "the elephant in the room" just came from, I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but when the phrase came, it made so much sense because the elephant in the room, the an elephant in a room is literally something that should not happen. And upon doing my research on neglected tropical disease, I realized that these diseases are quite preventable, and it's not just wasn't just fair that this disease still affect a lot of people, affecting almost 1.7 billion people. And I was wondering why this had not been addressed. So I tried to sort of bring all that together and bring a story of a boy um having to a boy having to fight all this and to look forward to hopeful days. So the please can we move to the next slide. I guess to let's type it. So I'll be breaking down the picture and my process of how I got to this. And so the boy and his leg. So the picture, I got the picture from a free stock website. It was a picture taken on of a boy, a grayscale photo of a boy sitting on the stairs. And why did I pick a child? Upon my research on lymphatic filariasis, I realized that actually this disease starts from childhood. And if it's a disease that starts from childhood and it's something that goes on for a very long time, it will affect eventually what the child will be able to do with his potential. So I had to think, and that's why I used the child for this picture. And in his legs, I had to cover his legs with just a picture of elephant legs to show the classic sign of elephantiasis that is seen in lymphatic filariasis. Next slide. So I just tried to show the disease in the child and how elephantiasis would sort of present in a child. Next slide. So to now buttress and to bring out the part concerning hope, after I've shown that this child has been affected or has been affected by this condition, the next important thing was making sure that this child could still do something with his life, could still tap into the potential that he had. So I had to explain the concept of hope, and I used salient features to just bring out that show of hope. And if you notice from the picture, the child has a gaze where he's looking upwards. So it just helped, and I just utilized that, and I sort of like emphasized the gaze with the two white lines, and also the seat which he was sitting on. The background was digitally removed, and I replaced it with three lines that helped accentuate this gaze, this hopeful gaze that the child had. So next slide. So so the last component of this collage was that then I had to implement or also had to include what caused a sort of infographic into what is causing this problem for this child. So the circle around his head, the circle here is not really showing, but the circle was a textured circle. So you have like little dots in the circle and try to show the different species of mosquito. One of the fun facts I even discovered concerning lymphatic filariasis was that it was the first mosquito-borne disease to be discovered. So that was also significant. I also had to put the circle to signify the mosquito, and I also had to put the parasites, the adult stage of Wucheria bankruptcy, the parasite that causes lymphatic filariasis in this child. And so basically that's the breakdown. Next slide. So basically that's the breakdown of how I came about this collage. And since the collage was made and it was submitted and I won the second place prize in the digital category, the collage has gone on to be used for a lot of things. In the first picture, we have the collage being used as the cover for the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. It was used for the supplementary publication on accelerating innovation to impact. It has also been displayed in it was also displayed in the Youth Combating Entities Gallery. So please, next slide. So that's all about my work. Now, I would like to be discussing what it's like to be a creative or an emerging creative. So I'll first start by defining what a creative is. So a creative basically means professionals in the field of graphics design, copywriting, video production, and social media marketing. Also, a creative is an artist, a creative is an individual, and a creative is a thought leader. So as creatives, we're not just making things, we also have to think. As an artist, you think outside the box, you break rules, you experiment with things. So that's the whole essence of being a creative. Please, next slide. And the importance of neglected tropical diseases to a creative is actually very important, because as at the time when neglected tropical diseases were named neglected tropical diseases, they were named neglected because they were issues for which the level of awareness and resources necessary to develop solutions had not been sufficiently garnered. And as an artist, I think that speaks to me, because I would, as an artist, as I've said, we are thought leaders. So it makes you think why something that affects a lot of people has not been a lot of resources have not been put into it. As at now, I'm sure a lot has changed since the name neglected tropical diseases have been used. But still, there's still a gap, and as an artist, it just piques my interest that how can I help and how can I try to use the talent I have to sort of develop and help with solutions that would raise awareness and raise resources to combat these issues. So please, next slide. So the role of creatives in general and how they can help and benefit the neglected tropical disease space. Number one is by developing campaign concepts. We can also work with we can also help with creating engaging visual content. And visual contents tend to pull people close and tend to push people and spur people on to do things. So another important function or role of a creative is in creating compelling copy. So copy here has to do with copywriting and creating compelling advertisements for NTD awareness campaigns. As an artist, so another creative also is also important. We also do well in utilizing social media, and there's also partnership. So try to partner with organizations that would help bring organizations that will help make sure that the awareness we need and the resources that would help in combating these diseases are done well. So next slide. So as my fellow panelists also mentioned, as an emerging creative, there's still challenges in this industry. As a creative generally, not only in the NTD space, in a country like Nigeria, and from a study that I read, it was shown that most people don't actually think the creative industry is that lucrative. It's funny enough because a lot of money is actually in the creative industry, but people still don't think it's lucrative. I think in a study that was done here in Nigeria, just 4% of people thought you could make sort of a living from being a creative. But that's not really the case. It's a challenge, yes. The lucrativeness is not so lucrativeness is an issue because it would not encourage people to come into this space and try to use their talents for things like that. In Nigeria, yeah, most people tend to look at more concrete jobs like maybe medicine, law, engineering, and most people tend not to push or encourage gifts that have to do with being creative. Another problem is underfunding and underdevelopment. The government is also in sync with my fourth point on mediocre government and societal support. So with mediocre government and societal support to the creative industry, it doesn't exactly encourage a lot of materials coming from there, and I think it's an important industry where the government can tap into and try to use and to help. Another challenge is the low chances of success. So while creatives create a lot of things, and it has been shown, while creatives create a lot of materials and a lot of art um, and things, and the chances of success sometimes may not be exactly high. But I don't. It's a challenge for emerging creatives, but I feel like the eventually the chances of success actually increase, because the more work you put out, and I think I am at fault for this. I don't put enough work out for on neglected tropical disease, but I feel like the more work is being done in this place, and the more awareness is being raised on neglected tropical disease, eventually someone would notice, and it would help somebody out there, because 1.7 billion people is quite a lot of people. So the next slide, please. So one of the ways creatives can be encouraged is by, or one of the ways creatives have been encouraged of recent in the NTD space is by creative friendly organizations. I'll start by thanking the International Society of Neglected Tropical Diseases. They've done an excellent work releasing they've done an excellent work releasing a lot of showcases. I think we started since 2017 and up to 2023 that we're in now. That's about 6 showcases. They've brought a lot of creatives forward to talk about their work. Another important organization is Uniting to Combat NTDs and the Youth Combating NTDs, where especially with the global storytelling competition that they hosted in 2020 and 2021. So I think there are other youth-friendly organizations, creative-friendly organizations, but it would be encouraging if there are a lot more organizations and actively challenging the creatives to create things for negative tropical disease. Next slide. I would like to give so for the case of the Uniting to Combat Tropical Disease, the 100% committed campaign that was held recently, and that was used in Kigali and Wonde, was actually the brainchild of the champions from the youth combating entities competition, the storytelling competition. And it was actually very nice to see that as creatives that we were from different parts of Africa, it was very nice to see that the work we put in together was actually used, and the tagline or phrase, the 100% committed, that we tried to think of together was used. We also created a music video that was actually played at the 100% committed conference. So things like that and ideas like that actually help and encourage creativity and more creatives in the NTD space. Next slide. So these are just QR codes to the gallery for the Global Youth Storytelling Award and for past International Society of Neglected Tropical Disease showcases. Next slide. And so for my recommendations concerning how creativeness in the neglected tropical space can be encouraged. Number one is by governmental and societal support. As I've shown, I've mentioned some organizations earlier. They've done a lot of work, but I think more work can still be done. Another recommendation is better organization. And better organization in the sense that there is more networking for the creatives. I think when creatives work together is better. If you're a loner and you are just trying to create stuff, there are some things you would not probably have known or have noticed. But when you come together and work with creatives of like mind, and you're constantly surrounded by it, will also buttress into my next habit. It will also enter into my next point concerning the source of information. So when you're surrounded by people of like mind and you also have the right source of information, I think it will make a lot of difference in the output of creativeness in the creative space of neglected tropical disease. So my next slide, which is the conclusion. So as I mentioned earlier, what spurred me exactly to think about neglected tropical disease, the fact that there's been a lot of as neglected tropical disease have have as the name neglected was as the name of neglected tropical disease was gotten, it was due to the fact that not a lot of resources and effort had been put into trying to combat this. But as of now, I would say that neglected tropical diseases have sort of been moved to a sort of high level priority, at least with what I've seen so far from the NTD space. And as an emerging artist, I think or an emerging creator, I think some of the important parts of this or the entity space that we need to create content more on is the message of need. We need to create more content on the burden of diseases and of the burden of the different diseases and how they've been affecting people. There's also need for us to show that actually the drugs that help with this the drugs that help with these diseases have been made available, and also the proven successes that have been recorded. It would help and encourage more people with if there can be more creative work done on these different aspects. So I think I'm done with my presentation. Thank you very much. Next slide. Yeah, this is the references on the research that was done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ireoluwa, for that absolutely brilliant presentation. A lot of people are saying that in the chat as well, and you raised some huge points. And I do wonder about this balance between the creatives, who are absolutely needed. It's the reason we're doing the festival, because it's that cliff edge between operational research results coming out, from that ending to actual change at the policy level, actual change at the community level. What is that abyss? For us, it's about communication, right? So there's an absolute need for your skill sets, for your engagement. And I'm really, I wonder how this kind of balancing of activism versus employment in the life of a creative is going to kind of play out. What pathways are available. So I'm sure we'll explore that in the Q&A slightly afterwards. But thank you very, very much for that. We're getting some great feedback from the audience too. That kind of brings us to the next. We've talked about creatives. We wanted to kind of show kind of an end point of a creative process. And in this instance, we're talking about a film about a very neglected disease, scabies, in a community setting in terms of Ethiopia. And so we're absolutely honored really to bring to the floor Dereje Wonde and Eyerusalem Kassahun from Bahir University, the 5S Foundation, and Brighton and Sussex Medical School. Dereje and Eyerusalem from the Addis Ababa University, 5S Foundation, and BSMS, Brighton and Sussex Medical School. I'm going to hand over the floor to both Dereje and Eyerusalem. After this, we're going to have a little bit of Q&A if we have enough time, and then we're going to play the actual film as well for everybody. So over to you, Dereje and Eyerusalem. The floor is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity, and hello everyone. My name is Dereje Wonde. I'm a PhD student at Brighton and Sussex Medical School. I'm from Ethiopia. So today we have a documentary carried out in the community setting about the lived experience of people affected by scabies. So I am here to say something about the background information which leads to the making of the film, Agony of the Night. So we have 5S Foundation, which stands for social science for severely stigmatizing skin conditions, funded by NIHR. And 5S Foundation works to end the neglect of 3 conditions: podoconosis, scabies, and mycetoma in 3 African countries: Ethiopia, Sudan, and that of Rwanda. And the 5S aims to conduct a research which improves the health and the well-being of people by bringing context-specific interventions informed by social science perspectives at the level of the patient, micro level, at the community level, and national policy level. So as a PhD student, I'm doing an ethnographic research on the everyday life of people affected by scabies in Ethiopia, Amhara regional state. So scabies is highly prevalent in Ethiopia, and particularly since 2015-16, there have been massive outbreaks of scabies at the community level, associated with drought induced to El Nino effect. So that there have been severe drought since 2015-16, and there have been again an outbreak of scabies, especially in the Amhara region. And Agony of the Night was carried out at the community level just to include the understanding, the local understanding of those affected by the disease, as well as the management is used to control the disease. And I facilitated the conduct of the film, which was directed by Eyerusalem, and Eyerusalem will say more about the film later, and I hope you will watch the film at the end. So people have been just contracting scabies because of their living arrangements, living conditions, and they suffer a lot from this severely itching disease, and they call it agony of the night because the itching becomes very severe in the night, and people just they forget in the daytime, but because they are busy with their everyday agricultural activities, and when they are sleeping, the itching starts, and they suffer insomnia and other things. Scabies is also highly stigmatizing. People suffer from a number of isolations, discriminations for contracting the disease. And we have a particular group, religious students, who have been massively, affected by the disease, the scabies, and you will see their stories from the documentary. So the local people, they consider the scabies as something trivial also. It is highly prevalent. And there is also normalization of the disease by the local community, as well as local health authorities and local health workers. And we carried out this film to sensitize the concerned stakeholders at the community level as well as at the national level, and just to end the neglect of this highly prevalent disease. And that is just an introduction for the film Agony of the Night. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Dereje. Excellent. And I think we're going to pass the floor over to Eyerusalem, I think. Eyerusalem, if you're there.
Yeah. Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi there. Brilliant. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Eyerusalem Kassahun. So I am a PO for 5S Ethiopia. As explained by Dereje, 5S has been doing, trying to approach the skin disease from social science. So as part of the project, we have been producing different artworks to disseminate research findings that has been conducted and carried out by our PhD and postdoc researchers. So we've made this documentary in collaboration with Dereje in his site, as he has already established the relationship with different stakeholders in that particular area, it was easy for us to meet people and to have a conversation with those who has been affected by the disease. So I think the documentary captured the daily activities of people who have been affected by scabies and the impact that it has on their daily life. And I strongly believe that this film will be an important addition to the existing materials on scabies and other skin diseases in terms of communicating or disseminating ideas that has never been delivered to the society or in a grassroots levels. So if there is any question or comments, I would like to add on those points later.
Brilliant, Eyerusalem. Thank you for those insights. I think we're going to have a Q&A at the end. I mean, if you have any more additional points to add, now would be the time. And then I'm going to bring everybody back and have the Q&A with you and then play the film. Would that be okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. So if you have any, brilliant. If you have any other points to make now, please do so. If not, we can bring everybody back for the Q&A. That's entirely up to you. Should we start with Q&A?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. So firstly, round of applause. Let me come back on the screen, actually, so it'll be easier so you can see my face as well. So thank you very much for that. We're in awe. We know you're really up and coming, massive leading light in terms of director, in terms of the film scene in Ethiopia. So we're fully aware of that. An assistant professor, so we're very much in awe of how all of that translates into film. I genuinely mean that. And I was saying to Dereje, I spent some time in Ethiopia, in Kemise, for some research project, and Addis Ababa a couple of years ago. Absolutely loved to be there. So it's fantastic that you're shining a light on that. If I could ask the other panelists just to come back with their cameras so we can see you all. We'll have a little bit of a Q&A. So there's Ireoluwa, thank you. There's Obed, and I think Dereje, we're just waiting for you. Perfect, brilliant. So firstly, thank you very, very much for really some of the comments in the audience were saying. Excellent presentation, thought-provoking for all stakeholders, great presentation all the way through that. Edna Zifedo actually made a point, on point, yeah, on point. And I think that's absolutely the way, because 3 areas were highlighted, which we ourselves have kind of seen. We wanted to kind of link all of this together. And the first of those is this funding challenge, right? It's a given that creativity at local level, with that local lived experience in mind, with the that kind of momentum is needed. Absolutely is needed. Everybody's talking, we need it. So that's a given. The question moves to how do we fund this? How do we move this forward? And I'm going to ask you all that question for suggestions on that. I think, Obed, you'd mentioned something about a global commitment. So would you like to kind of perhaps open the answers on that in terms of funding on this? How should this happen? I think you're still on mute. Yeah. I think you're still on mute. You have to go to the top of the screen and press the microphone button. Yeah. Sorry. Or perhaps refresh your browser, and then perhaps that's what it is. Oh, okay, yeah. I think Obed will rejoin us. I'll just push that question. Oh no, Obed's back. Okay, 1 second. So the question we were talking about here is quite a fundamental question, that the creative, as we can see from the entries and everything, creativity doesn't just exist, the skill sets exist on various little platforms. So Obed, what's your view on the solution to this issue of funding? Well, I think your microphone is off. On the top of the screen, there's a bar, and you have to, buttons. So you just press the microphone button. So when it goes blue, you're on.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
That's it. Perfect.
Okay. So, in the presentation, I've talked about how youth to engage in uh, fighting NTDs, we need funding and we need resources to do this. So, we lack resources and we lack funding. And the problem here is that youth have been left behind in this fight. When funding opportunities come, they are looking for well-established organization. There are some youth there down who have big projects, who have better approaches, but still need resources. For example, there's in some rural areas where there is high existence or many cases of NTDs, and those people are not known even at the national level.
Yeah.
And there is a youth there who can use filming to show the world, to show the nation what is happening there, but even don't have access to the cameras or other equipment. So when at the national level they are budgeting for the fight against NTDs, let them take into consideration the youth.
Yeah.
As they come down here to look for amazing artists in rural areas, they can come also to look for creative minds who are working hard to achieve equitable healthcare for all, because healthcare is a fundamental right to
Yeah.
all. Thank you.
That's a brilliant answer, Obed. Thank you for Let me I'll just flip that back to Dereje and Eyerusalem. We're really talking here about the balance between activism and employment in a way. In a way, we're talking about the reality of a creative's life, right? That the creatives exist. How do they balance their life in terms of being able to earn as well as channel that desire for advocacy and the good for all, that kind of positive momentum. So let me flip the question back to Dereje and Eyerusalem. From your film production, directorship, that landscape, what kind of opportunities do you see for the local youth, local creative passion and talent? So either Dereje or both of you can. We'll flip that to both of you. Perhaps Eyerusalem, we could ask you first.
Before answering the question, I just want to add on what my brother said. I think it's very important for all the creative artists to get paid or to have a fund to say something about the NTDs, because as the name indicates, NTD or neglected tropical diseases, it has been like putting aside. And also, most importantly, it's very important to communicate that idea with people at different levels. So in order to do that, it's a must to have a fund from different stakeholders so that people can get the idea of what those entities are and how do they prevent those things, and also the neglect that comes with the entities. So it's very important to work collaboratively or to come together and try to fight those entities. So for our project, it was very important for us to have that budget because the 5 years was funded by NIHR. So it was easy for us to go there and to listen to their stories and to just capture their stories and tell the world that they're living in that way. So that's how they live, that's how they interact with people, and how the disease affects their daily life, their daily relationship with people. So it's very important to have a budget or to be funded, to have a fund for creative artists to speak out whatever they have in their mind about these kinds of issues.
That's a fantastic answer, and I love the revolutionary zeal in terms of this, the momentum here, because we're really talking about a global effort, perhaps a fund. We obviously talk of an African fund or a country by country fund, but what about a global effort? What are your views on that, Dereje, or in terms of this balancing between activism and employment? What are your views on that?
Yeah, thank you. There is a noise outside. Sorry for that.
No.
So the first thing is to give recognition for the power of having this creative artists to bring change, which is sustainable, which will be again owned by the local people at the grassroots level. So we need to recognize the power of this type of creative artworks in health research. And in our case, we have a good public engagement plan in 5S Foundation project. So attaching these creative works with big research projects will be another way of funding and encouraging the grassroots users. So if we participate, if we engage them by connecting them with big research projects like the 5S Foundation, when we can increase the impact of the project and we can make it sustainable, so that may be useful.
Well, that's fantastic. And we'd love to put all of you and all the various artists, Eji that we've mentioned, Oluwasam, and also Joanna, as well as everybody here, in touch with people like Professor Rod Dillon and also the FIA Cruise team. We have Professor Fernando Genta speaking later about arts in a healthcare setting from FIA Cruise, and lots of collaborations available. So we'd love to put you all in touch with each other. You never know, there might be a fertile ground for this kind of movement to start. Just flipping this to Ireoluwa for a second, we're talking here activism, employment within that, and the costs that somebody faces in terms of a creative, but they want to get their creations out, they want to have that passion, they want to get an output, as you've very beautifully illustrated and shown with your elephant in the room and the 4 designs that you've put forward. There are quite, and I've merged some of the questions from the audience as well to ask you. So Eji had asked from all the way from Texas, is there any information on financial costs for being a creative, making and producing the various works? So that's obviously there are costs and there may be different projects. But he's saying that he's asking that can free and open source softwares help to reduce such a cost? Are there free or open source softwares that you can recommend? And I put that to Ireoluwa because you did produce that digital output. So that's a kind of specific question for you, Ireoluwa.
Yeah, thank you. So for the question on activism and employment, I would say, as you said, there needs to be a common ground in as much as people want to make a change. And I think established, as Obed has said, I think established organizations can actually help and commission works and give these artists, and that would help in the employment part. And at the same time, the activists or the part that's to do with being an activist would also be fulfilled by working with this established organization. So basically, I think it's more of the work on the established organizations to help these creatives. And as I said before, networking among the creatives, if there's a common ground, or if there's a place where creatives can like communicate, and like I think it will even be easier to identify these creatives and to help creatives that probably need help, and to help with rewarding the employment part of the activism employment issue.
Brilliant.
Now for the so for the question on the free, on if free resources help, because I'm not sure of the exact price of Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator now, but I'm sure it's in the hundreds of dollars. And it's not something that most people can afford if you're not employed. You probably won't be able to afford that. But there are different free softwares out there, and the one I used for the elephant in the room is called Gravity Design. It's a web-based application that was created by CorelDRAW. So it sort of competes with Photoshop and Illustrator to an extent. It is not as powerful as as those programs, but you can still use them to create meaningful things like
Brilliant, excellent.
the fantasm that I created. Yeah,
and that's a great answer. The Gravit design and the Coral Draw, the specific platform. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that insight. I wanted to flip a question back to the filmmakers, to Eyerusalem and Dereje, in terms of we're obviously going to show the film after this short Q&A in about, let's say, 5 minutes or so from now. We're going to play the whole film for everybody to see, and that will end the session. Do you have plans to, we were talking about recognition earlier, that part of it is this balance between activism, advocacy, and the costs involved, who funds it. The other problem is recognition, peer-to-peer recognition. So may I ask you, do you have plans, we're screening it, but do you have plans to screen it outside of us, in terms of different settings?
Yes. Can I go first?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yes, we do have a lots of plans to screen it in different parts of Ethiopia, both as the means of advocating, creating awareness in different parts of Ethiopia, especially in rural areas where scabies is prevalent. Also in different workshops that we have been conducting on scabies and podoconiosis, because we have been using this kind of artworks to create awareness. So we're gonna screen the movie in different places. So we have a plan to screen it.
Excellent. And I hope we can get, the screening we're going to do now, I hope that has an impact as well. Obviously, people do deserve to see that. David Mwezi is saying, I strongly agree with Dereje on a point that you made earlier in terms of combining research and public engagement and how that's going to create impact to the lives of masses affected by NTDs. I wanted to ask a question because someone in the audience, Jem, I think from the Brighton and Sussex Medical School, I believe, or 5S Foundation, had asked about challenges in filming. And I wanted to kind of wrap this to all of you. We had yesterday a talk, we mentioned this kind of term, creating trust in communities, right? But somebody had said to us, it was Bruno Cole from the World Mosquito Program, that they rely more on borrowing trust. So partnership building and that kind of, involvement. And in a way, we're talking about involving the youth of these communities, affected communities. So is there a community of practice or a community that we can reach into to drive that? I mean, to build that, to borrow that trust. That's a question for Eyerusalem and for Dereje. For perhaps Dereje would go with that first, in terms of public engagement, combining research and public engagement, borrowing trust from that community, giving them employment, all of it wrapped into one.
Thank you for that important question. So in Ethiopia, under 5S, we have this community of practices where influential figures from the community, including the religious leaders and the elderly, as well as the youth, they come up together and they just own the problem. So they participate in advocating, in creating awareness, and in fighting stigma and other things. So we have been implementing this, especially in one condition, podoconiosis, and we have a plan to expand this practice to scabies. So that is an important area of public engagement for us.
Oh, fantastic. That's a great answer. I mean, we could spend all day, and we wish we had longer to really get into depth in terms of the community engagement, mobilization, bringing all of their lived experience out, and how that's going to happen. And I'm sure, I know we'll be in contact in terms of perhaps a future session, in more in-depth session with more time. But because we want to play the film, and screen that film for you. It's wonderful, wonderfully made and very powerful, and we wanted everybody to see that. So with your permission, and firstly, thank you very, very much for you know, to yourselves for making time and being here, and also to the audience in terms of these interactions as well. Thank you for that. So with your permission, do you think we can film, we can screen that then now? Do you think that's okay if we show that now? Is that okay with everybody? Yeah?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brilliant. And what I would say is that I think we're going to put up on the screen a link to the next session, which starts at 1:30. It's very interesting. We talked about these issues because the next session is the South African Development Community SADC youth, the youth of 16 different countries, yeah, represented in a health cluster, but then very interestingly, because it's about changing narratives, right? It's their head of Pan-Africanism, arts, culture and heritage cluster. And we're looking at role models and all sorts of stuff within that particular session. That's going to start at 1:30. I think the link is being posted as we speak. And I think it's up in the Q&A actually. It's there, but so do join that at 1:30. From me now, I want to say goodbye, and I'm going to just leave you. You can all just stay here, and we're going to put the film on now. When it's ended, then I would suggest that, you know, at 1:30, the next session is going to start. So just a round of applause for everybody. I do apologize that it's a short time for Q&A. We wanted to get more kind of in there, but we're constrained with time. But thank you very, very much for making time. So thank you, Eyerusalem, thank you, Dereje, thank you, Obed, and thank you, Ireoluwa. And please know that our awards ceremony is later this afternoon, and we were going to be giving out our recognition awards. I can't say too much just yet. We're going to make the announcement then. Okay, so right, have a great day, and I'm going to press this the video to go on. So round of applause, drum roll, Agony of the Night.
እንደዚህ ሰላም ይውልና ለይስ ላይ በጣም ያሳክከኛል። አረፍት ያሳክከኛል።
በነገው ቁስል አይወጣም። ማታ ነው
ማታ ስተኛ በቃ ያሳክከኛል።
በቃ 12 ሰዓት በኋላ ነው የሚጀምረው። በጣም ያመኛል። 12 ሰዓት እንደዚህ በቃ ፀሐይ እንደሚወጣ ካለችው ማታ በኋላ በጣም ሌሊት ነው በቃ በጣም ያመኛል። ቀን ብዙም አይደለም። ማታ እንደዚህ እንደ ጀንበር እንደመግባት ካለች 12 ሰዓት በኋላ ማታ በቃ እኛ ራሱ በእኛ ሀገር መሸግሪ ምናምን ነው የሚለው። ማታ በጣም ስለሚያሳክከል ማለት ነው። መሸግሪ ምናምን ነው የሚለው። ቄስ በልስት ይባላል እና ከሰኞ እኔ ከብቶችን ይዤ እወጣለሁ። እሷ ቁርስ ታዘጋጃለች። ሰርተን ወደ ከብት በበዓል ቀን ማልደን ተነስተን ከብቶች ለህፃናቶች ሰጠን ቤተክርስቲያን እንሳለማለን። ቄስ ነኝ።
ስሜ መራ ጽድቅ መብት ይባላል። መኮንን ይባላለሁ። በምስራቅ ጎጃም በደብረ ኤልያስ ወረዳ እማራለሁ። የቆሎ ተማሪ ነኝ።
ታያር ካሳሁን ባረሪ 6ኛ ክፍል ተማሪ ነኝ።
ታያር ካሳሁን አባት ነኝ።
ስሜ ኃይለ ማርያም ተካባለ። የመጣሁት ከደቡብ ጎንደር ነው። በደብረ ኤልያስ ቅኔ ጉባኤ ነው የምማረው።
ያው እንግዲህ አብዛኛውን ጊዜ በቆዳ ላይ የሚራባ በሽታ ነው። ይህንን በሽታ የምታመጣው እንግዲህ ሳርኮፓተስ ስካቢ ቫርቲ ሁማነስ በምትባል የቅንቅን ወይም የቅማል ዘር ነው። እዚች አብዛኛውን ጊዜ በሰው ቆዳ ላይ እንቁላሏን በመጣል ነው የምትራባው። ስለዚህ ወደ ሰውነታችን ቆዳ ቦርቦራ ከገባች በኋላ ከ2 ሳምንት እስከ 3 ሳምንት ባለው እንቁላሏን እየወጣች ወደ ጫፍ ትጥላለች። እነዚህ እንቁላሎች ደግሞ የሰውነት ቆዳን እየቦረቦሩ ያው ምግባቸው የሰውነት ቆዳ ላይ ያሉ ሴሎችን ስለሆነ ከዚያ ላይ እየተራቡ ይሄዳሉ ማለት ነው።
ወደኛ ጋር ሲመጡ ማለት ነው አንደኛ ኢቺንግ ኦፍ ዘ ላይን ቆዳቸውን ያሳካቸዋል። ሁለተኛ ደግሞ ፓምፕል ላይክ ስኪን ራሽ ይኖራቸዋል ማለት ነው እኛ ጋር ሲመጡ እና ስለዚህ ሲምፕተሞቹ እነዚህ ናቸው።
እከክ እንደያዘ ማውቀው መጀመሪያ ሲነሳ ያሳክከኛል፣ ይበላኛልና ያሳክከኛል። አዛም በኋላ ይፈርጣል፣ የመፍረጥ ማይሪ ያመጣና አዛም በኋላ በቃ ያመኛል። በቃ አዛም በኋላ
መጀመሪያ እንደ ትንሽ አሳከከኝ። ከዚያም በኋላ እየቀደም እየባሰነ እጅ እየበጠ ሀደ እየቆሰለ መጣ።
ለሁለት ሳምንት ያህል በጣም አድርጎ ነው ያሳከከው። በቃ ይሄን አያችሁ አንገቱ ሁላ እንደዚህ ነበር የሚሸቀሽቅ። እየበላ ራሱ እንዲህ ይላል። እየበላ በቃ ምግብ እየበላ እንዲህ ይላል። አንተ ለምን ነው ስለው በቃ በላኝ ነው ነበር።
ከኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ የቆየ በሽታ ነው፣ አዲስ የምንለው አይደለም። ኢቭን በአማርኛም ስም አለው ራሱን የቻለ እና ነባር ከሚባሉት በሽታዎች መካከል ነው። ስፔሻሊ በገጠሩ የማህበረሰብ ክፍል አካባቢ በደንብ የሚታወቅ በሽታ ነው። ነገር ግን እንደ ወረርሽኝ የተከሰተው ባለፉት 5 ዓመታት ጀምሮ ነው።
ወረርሽኝ የተከሰተው እንግዲህ በደብረ ኤልያስ 4 የጤና ጣቢያ ሳይቶች አሉ። ከነሱ ውስጥ እንግዲህ ጓይ ላይ ነው መጀመሪያ የተከሰተው። በ2013 አካባቢ ነው። በ2013 ጀመረ። 2013 ላይ በጣም ጎልቶ ወጣ። አጠቃላይ እዚህ የሚመጣው ኬዝ ስናየው በጣም እየጎላ ሲመጣ አሰስ ማድረግ ጀመረ። ቀበሌ እየወጣን አሰስ ስናደርግ በቀጥታ እዚህ ጋር ነበሩ የቆሎ ተማሪዎች። እነሱ ጋር ስንሄድ አጠቃላይ ሁሉም ሰው ታሟል። ከዛ በኋላ በየማህበረሰቡ ስንገባ አብዛኛው ማለት ይቻላል 80% የሚሆነው ሰው በቃ እንዳለ ታሟል።
በጣም እየጨመረ የመጣበት መንገድ ነበር። ለማሳየትም እንደሞከር ነው እንግዲህ እዚህ ላይ ቻርት ራስ ሰርተን እየተከታተልነው ነበር። ከየት ወደ የት እየሄደ ነው የሚለው እዚህ የሆነ ወቅት በጣም እየጨመረ ነበር። ስለዚህ ንጽህና ሲጠበቅ መድኃኒት ሲመጣ የመቀነስ ነገር አለው። መድኃኒቱ ደግሞ ሲጠፋ ኢንተራፕት ሲያደርግ የተወሰነ እንትን አለው።
እከክ በሽታ ያው ተንጽህና ጉድለትና ከውሃ ብክለት የሚመጣ በሽታ ነው። ከውሃ እጥረትም በአብዛኛው ይከሰታል። ይሄንን በአብዛኛው ከንጽህና ጉድለት ነው፣ ከአካባቢ ንጽህና ጉድለት ማለት ነው።
ከጤና ባለሙያዎችም እንደተረዳሁት እከክ ብዙ ጊዜ ንጽህናን ካለመጠበቅ ጋር፣ ልብስን በሰዓቱ ካለማጠብ ጋር፣ ሰውነትን ካለመታጠብ ጋር ያገናኙታል።
የምንቀዳበት 30 ደቂቃ ይወስዳል። ከዚያም ሄዶ ወረፋ አለው። ደሞም ጭቃው ጉድጓድ ነው። ከጉድጓድ ዝም ብሎ ፋሳሽ ነው። አወሬ ምናምን ሽንት አይጠበቅም። ወንዝ ነው። ወንዝ ደግሞ ብዙም አካባቢ ደግሞ የለውም እና ወንዝ ቦታ ሌላ ቦታ ነው ሄደን የምንቀዳ እና በእንደዛ ስለሆነ ለሻወር የሚበቃ ወንዝም የለውም ራሱ ቦታ።
ውሃ የለንም። ቢኖርም ደግሞ ፈረሱ ምኑ ይከፍቱ ምኑ የሆነበት ነው የምንታጠው። በቂ ኦሞ የለንም። ውሃ የምንታጠው የለንም። ሰውነታችን የምንታጠው እንደዚህ የከፍት ተቀጥቀው ምናምን ስለሆነ ውሃ ስለማናገኝ ምንም ነገር የለም።
ሻወር የምንወስደው ብዙ ጊዜ ቆይተን ነው። ያው በቃ ላብ ምናምን ያለበናል እንደዛ ይለናል። ንጽህናችን ባለመጠበቅ ምክንያት እንደዛ ነው የሚይዘን። ንጽህና ያለው ውሃ በቅርብ አናገኝም። ውሃ ሲጀምር ለምንጠጣው ራሱ ምንጠጣው ውሃ ራሱ ንጹህ አይደለም።
ሰውነታችን ውሃ ስለሌለ ስለማይኖር ከሁለት ሰዓት አንድ ቀን ነው ልብሳችን ደግሞ የምናጠው። እንደዛ ከወር አንድ ቀን እንደዛ ነው። የውሃ ችግር በጣም ስላለ እንደዚህ ስለማናጠው እንደዚህ ከዚህ ከንጽህና አኳያ ከክ ይነሳብና ማለት ነው።
ማታ ሲሆን ነው ስናከው አመር ነው የሚያወጣ። እንዲህ ስናከው አመር ነው የሚያወጣ። ሌላ ደም ምናምን አይወጣው። እንደዚህ ሲመሽ ወደ ማታ ሲሆን በጣም ያሳክከኝ ያሳሸኛል። እዛ ያከኩት በጣም በቃ ደስ ነው ወደው ሳከው ደስ ነው እና ይደማል።
ይኸው እንደሚታወቀው እከክ ሁሉንም የህብረተሰብ ክፍል ያጠቃል። ግን
በዋናነት የሚያጠቃቸው የህብረተሰብ ክፍል አሉ ማለት እንደ ቆሎ ተማሪዎች ማለት ስብስብ ብሎ የሚኖሩ ማህበረሰብ አይነት ማለት ነው።
በጤና ተቋማችን ደረጃ የተከሰተው ቆሎ ተማሪዎች ጋር ነው።
6 7 እስከ 8 የሚቀመጥ አለ። እኛ ግን 5 ሆነን የቆየ ነው እስካሁን ድረስ። ከኛ አሁን ከአንድ ቤት ከምንኖረው ተማሪዎች ውስጥ አንድ ተማሪ እከክታም ነው።
እነሱ ጋር ነኝ ቤት ስለሌለ ስለጠበበን ምንም መሄድ ስለማንችል ያው እነሱም እየፈሩ እንደዛ አንድ ላይ ነው ዝም ብለን የምንቀመጥ።
አብዛኛውን ጊዜ የምትኖረውና የምታጠቀው እንደ ተፋፍጎ በሚኖሩ ማህበረሰብ አካባቢ እንደ ተፈናቃይ ባለበት አካባቢ እንደ ሀብነት ትምህርት ቤቶች አካባቢ እነዚህ አካባቢ የሚኖር ለምንድን ነው የሃይጂን ሳኒቴሽን ወይም የንጽህና ጉድለት ስለሚታይ ነው። ምክንያቱም እነዚህ ሰዎች ንጹህ ውሃ በቂ ውሃ ያገኙ የተመጣጠነ ምግብ ላይ ያገኙ ይችላሉ። ስለዚህ በሆነበት አጋጣሚ እሷ በብዛት የመራባት እድል ይኖራታል። ከዚህ አካባቢ ያሉ ሰዎች ደግሞ የሚኖሩትም ተደጋግፈው በአንድ ላይ አብረው በማስ ስለሚኖሩ ንክኪያቸውን በጣም የበለጠ ስለሆነ እዚህ አካባቢ ወከኳ በብዛት ትሰፋለች። የስርጭት ሂደቷም ለሷ አፋጣኝ ነው። ቀጥታ ከሰው ወደ ሰው ንክኪ ስለሆነ በንክኪ ሊሆን ይችላል ከሰው ወደ ሰው እቃዎችን በመነካካት ይሁን ለምሳሌ ክሎዝ የምንላቸው ልብስ አልባሳትን እሱ የለበሰውን ፎጣ ወይም ጋቢ ምናምን የምንለብስ ከሆነ እሷ ልብሱ ላይ ታርፋለች። በሚታጋጠም ሊሆን ይችላል ከዚያ ላይ ወደ ሌላው ሰው ትተላለፋለች ማለት ነው። መከላከል
የምንችልበት ዘዴ አብረን ልብስ ባለመጓዋስና አብረን ባለመተኛት እናውቅ ነበር። ግን የቤቱ ችግር አብረን በቃ ሌላ ቤት ትርፍ ቤት ለሱ ለብቻው አንድ ቤት ስለማያገኝ በመኝታ በምናምን ይዘናል እንዳያ ነው እያያዘን የነበረው ወደፊትም እና አሁንም አብረን መኖራችንን እንትን ማለት አንቻልንም። የቤት በማጣት ጎጆ በማጣት ምክንያት ማለት ነው። እና አብሮን ነው የሚተኛ ዛሬ እና ልጁ እሱ ደግሞ በጣም ተይዟል አሁን።
አያስጠጋን እኛን ወደኛ ታስተላልፋለ ይላሉ። እንደዚህ ስለማ አምኒታ ደግሞ ራቅ ብለተኛ እንደዛ ስለሚሆን እንደዚህ ነገር ተጽዕኖ ያደርስብናል።
አንተ ጉጽፋራም ወደዛ አሁን በቃ ተጨመረ ነው ወይ አብረና ተቀመጥ ወይም ወደ ቤተሰብ ታከም እና አብረና ተተኛ ተሞካማት ጠጋን ታሲዘናለህ። በዚህ ነው አብረን እንደምር ምን ፈልገው
ከክ ማለት ያው በግዝ ጉጽፋር ነው የሚባለው እና እንደዛ ለምሳሌ አሁን አንተ አትጠጋነ ጉጽፋራም እንደዚህ ምናምን ይላል።
እነዚህ በራሱ አንድን ሰው ለመስደብ ዝቅ ለማድረግ ለማግለል የሚጠቀሙባቸው ናቸው እና ከዚህ ጋር ተያይዞ በከክ የተያዙ ሰዎች ራሳቸውን የማግለል በራሳቸው የማፈር ስሜት ወይም የሰልፍ ስቲግማ የምንለው በደንብ ያለ ነገር ነው።
ከክ ያለው ሰው በብዛት ራሱ ሳይኮ ስለሚያሸማቀቀው ከማህበረሰብ የመጨመር እድል ላይኖረው ይችላል። ምክንያቱም ሰላም ለማለትም ሊፈራ ይችላል። ምክንያቱም በብዛት ከክምታጠቀው እጅ ላይ ብብት አካባቢ መቀመጫ አካባቢ እንደዚህ ብልት አካባቢ እነዚህ አካባቢ በብዛት ሆድና ጀርባ አካባቢ በብዛት ይሰፋል እና ይሄ ስለሆነ በብዛት እጅ አካባቢ ካለች ሰው ስለሚያየው ራሱ ሳይኮሎጂ ሊያሸማቅቃቸው ይችላል።
እዚህ ጋር እንደውም በተግባር ያየሁት ነገር አለ። የሆነ የ12ኛ ክፍል ተማሪ ነው እና ሳከመው ምንድነው ያለኝ እየተሳቀቅኩ ጓንት ለብሷል። እንደውም እንደዚህ አድርጎ የሆነ የራሱን ጓንት ለብሶ ለምንድነው እንደዚህ ያረክ ስለው እኔ ከህመሙ የበለጠ መሳቀቂ በቃ ሌላ ነገር ወለላ ትርጓሜ ምን ሆነ ነው ያሉኝ። ለመጨባበጥ ሁላ ስላልቻልኩኝ በቃ ከህመሙ የበለጠኝ መሳቀቁ ነው ምናምን ያለበት ደረጃ አለ እና በጣም አስከፊና አሰቃቂ ነው ማለት ወደ ሌላ ስም ነው የሚሰጡት ሰዎች። ምን ሆነ ነው ምንድነው የበከለ እስከምባል ድረስ ደርሻለሁ ያለኝ ሰው በተጨባጭ አለ እና እስከዚህ ድረስ አስከፊ ነው በጣም።
በዚሁ በበሽታው ምክንያት ከትምህርት ቤት ቀርቼ ከቤቱ እየዋልኩ ከብቶችን ማበላ።
እንግዲህ ያው የዛሬው ቀን ሁለተኛ ሳምንቱ ማለት ነው ታቆመ።
ለምሳሌ ከጓደኛ ጋር እንዳሻይ መጫወት አልችልም ነው ያለው። መነካካት ምናምን አልችልም። በዛ ላይ እኔም ራሱ አፍርበታለሁ። በጣም ነው ማፈር። እንደዚህ ነዶ ሳይው በጣም እናደዳለሁ ምናምን ነው የሚለው።
እንደ ስድብ መቆጠሩ ራሱ ከምን ጋር ነው የሚገናኘው? በቃ ዝቅተኛ ኑሮ የሚኖር ሰው ከካም ከተባለ አንድ ሰው ሳይኖርበት ኢቭን የሚያሳክከው ቁስሉ ነገር ሳይኖርበት ከካም ከተባለ ድሃ ከድህነት ጋር ማገናኘት እንደዛ አይነት ነገር ስለሆነ የሚያሳፍር ነገር ነው። አስቀያሚ በሽታ አድርገው ነው የሚወስዱት።
እና እኔ የምናደድ ባይሪ ይሰማኛል ስለዚህ
ሰው ፊት ቆመሽ እንደዚህ ማከክ ምናምን ያስቸግራል እና ያስጠላል።
በፊት ያው ለመናገር የሚቸገራሉ። ለኛ ለባለሙያዎች ራሱ አይናገሩም እንኳን ለሌላ ሰው አልፈው ማለት ነው።
አልተናገሩም። ምን አይነት ነገር መጣብኝ እያልኩ በጣም በውስጤ ነው እዚያው በውስጣችን ቤተሰብ ቤት ውስጥ የተደረገው ነገር የሰው አይነገር። እነሱን ጤና መድን እየተባለ ተምናደክማቸው ብለን በጸበሉን በምኑ ቆይተና
ሲብስበት ነው ማለት ነው። በእለቱ እንትን እንዳለ አልወሰድንም። በጣም ሲጎዳው ነው የወሰድነው።
ልክ በጣም አላስጠጋቸው ሲል ወይም ህመም ስሜቱ ሲበረታ፣ በዛ ላይ ደግሞ አላሰራቸው ሲል ተማሪዎች ሁሉ አስተመጻፍ ሁሉ ተቸግረው የነበሩበት ሁኔታ አለ። በዚያ አግባብ ይመጣሉ እንጂ በፊት ላይ ያው ቀደም ብለው ምን አጋጠመኝ ብለው ወደዚህ አይመጡ ነበር።
በፍጥነት ወደ ሐኪም ቤት ያለ መሄድ ነገር አለ። በበሽታው ባህሪም ለዚህ አስተዋጽኦ አድርጓል። ስፔሻሊ ሌሊት ላይ ነው በደንብ የሚበረታው የሚያሳክካቸው። ሌሊት እንቅልፍ አጥተው ያድራሉ በከኩ ተጠምደው። ከዛ ሲነጋ ይረሱትና በግብርና ሙያ የሚተዳደሩ ስለሆኑ እዛ ደብረ ኤልያስ ያጠናቸው የአብዛኞቹ የማህበረሰብ ክፍሎች ወደ ስራቸው ነው የሚሄዱት። ሲነጋ ይረሱታል። እና የበዓል ቀን በዓላት በሚከበሩ ሰዓት ጠብቀው ምናምን ነው ወደ ሐኪም ቤት የሚሄዱት።
ምናምን ስለሌለን ያው እንደዚህ ራቅ ብለን ስለመጣን ብር ምናምን ስለሌለን እንደዚህ ስላልሰራን ሄደን ብር ስለሌለን አልጠየቅንም።
ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ከዘመናዊ ትምህርት አስቀድሞ እስካሁን ድረስ የአብነት ትምህርት ቤት ዋነኛው የእውቀት መቅሰሚያ ቦታ ነው። የተለያዩ የትምህርት ደረጃዎችም አሉት። ተማሪዎቹ ከተለያዩ ቦታዎች በመሰብሰብ በትንሽ ጎጆ ውስጥ በርከት ብለው ይኖራሉ። ይህ ሁኔታም በቀላሉ እንዲይዛቸው ስለሚያደርግ በቀላሉ ሕክምናም ደግሞ ማግኘት ስለማይችሉ ብዙ ጊዜ የተማሪ በሽታ እየተባለ ይጠራል።
ቤት ምናምንኛም ደግሞ በጉባኤው ስለምንኖር ወይ ጤና መድን ደግሞ ከቤተሰብ ነው እንጂ እኛ ቤተሰቦቻችን ግላችን ስለማንዞር ይሄ ሂሳብ ወይ ላይኖር ይችላል። በጊዜው ደግሞ ታንታከም ይችላል። አንድ ወደ አንዱ እያለ ብዙ ሁሉም ተማሪ ይዞ ይችላል። በአንድ ተማሪ አንድ ጉባኤ አንድ ሌላ ጉባኤ አንድ ተማሪ ይዞት ከመጣ ሀዚ ላለው ጉባኤ ተማሪ ይበቃል።
ትምህርታቸውን ለመቀጠል የቆሎ ተማሪዎች ከተለያዩ አካባቢዎች ነው የሚመጡት። በመሆኑም ትምህርታቸውን እስከሚጨርሱ ድረስ በሚሄዱበት አካባቢ ሁሉ በልመና ነው የሚበሉትን የሚያገኙት። ምክንያቱም ተማሪዎቹ ከቤተሰቦቻቸው ርቀው ነው ያሉት። ስለዚህ ለዕለት ምግባቸው የሚሆነውን ነገር ማግኘት የሚችሉት እዛው ያለው የአካባቢው ነዋሪ በልመና በሚሰማሩበት ጊዜ የሚሰጣቸውን ነገር እሱን አዘጋጅተውን መመገብ የሚችሉት።
ሰላም ቦቱ ሰክወ ነው
ትክክል ነው። ጥያቄው ይነሳል። በተለይ በእነዚህ የቆሎ ተማሪ በሚባሉት በኩል አንደኛ አካባቢ ርቀው ነው የሚመጡ፣ ገንዘብም የላቸውም፣ ይሄ ነፃ ሕክምና የሚባለውም የላቸውም እና በእነሱ በኩል ያው ህመሙ የሚጸናባቸዋል። ጥያቄውም በእነሱ በኩል ነው አብዛኛውን የሚመጣ።
በኢኮኖሚ ደረጃ ሲጀመር ስኬቢስ የድሃ በሽታ ነው የሚባለው።
ለምሳሌ ፕሪሜትሪያን ፍሪ ነው የሚታደለው። ሌሎች ግን በፕራይስ አላቸው ራሱ የቻለ።
እንደ ጤና ተቋም አንድ መድኃኒት በበጀት ማለት ብር ተከፍሎ ጤና ጣቢያው ብር ከፍሎ ከሆነ ያመጣው ያን መድኃኒት በነፃ ማደል አይችልም፣ ምክንያቱም ይከስራል። ግን እንደ ቅድም እንዳልኩሽ ተሰርቶ ፐርሰንቱ እዚህ አካባቢ ከዚያ ከተባለው ከ15% በላይ ከሆነ እንደ ወረዳ ማለት ነው፣ ከዚያ በላይ ከሆነ ከሌሎች አካላት ጋር ተነጋግሮ በነፃ ሕክምና የሚሰጥበት መንገድ አለ።
ያው ሕክምናው ሁለት አይነት ነው ያልኩት። አንድ በዘመቻ መልክ ለአጠቃላይ ለሁሉም ማህበረሰብ የሚሰጥበት መንገድ አለ። ሁለተኛ ሴሌክቲቭ ኬዝ እና ኮንታክት የምናከምበት አለ። ስለዚህ እን ስናደርግ ምንድነው በብዛት የኛውን ሬሾውን ስንሰራው አጠቃላይ የህክምናን ሲካፈል ለቀበሌው ህዝብ በዛሽ ቀበሌ ወይም በዛሽ ጎጥ ላለው ህዝብ ከ15% እና በላይ ከሆነ እንግዲህ ትሪትመንት ጋይድ ላይ የሚያዘው ወይም የህክምና መመሪያ የሚያዘው ከ15% እና በላይ ከሆነ ሁሉንም ማህበረሰብ ማስ ትሪትመንት አድሚኒስትሬሽን ነው። ለሁሉም ማህበረሰብ መድኃኒት በዘመቻ መልክ ለሁሉም መታደል መቻል አለበት ነው። ከኪኖርበትም አይኖርበትም የዛችን ጎጥ ወይም የዛችን ቀበሌ ከህክምናን ለጠቅላላ ህዝብ አካፍለን ከ15% እና ታች ከሆነ ኮንታክት እና ያው ኬዝ ያለባቸው ሰዎች ተለይተው ይታከማሉ።
ያው በአብዛኛው እኛ ቤት ለቤትም ስለምንሰራ በአብዛኛው ሰነድ የከክ በሽታ እናገኛልና እነሱን ለይተን ይዝና እነሱም ከንጽህና ጉድለት እንደሆነ በደንብ የግንዛቤ ማስጨበጫ እንሰጣቸዋለን። ከዚያ ውጭ መጣው እንዲታከሙና ወደፊትም እንዳይዛቸው ከበሽተኛ ወደ ጤነኛ ስለሚተላለፍ የበሽታ በንጽህና እንዲጠብቁ ምናምን ትምህርቱን ሰጠን ህክምናውን እንሰጣቸዋለን።
ህክምናው ያው በሚዋጥ መልክም አለ፣ በሚቀባ መልክም አለ። ፕሪሜትሪን ይባላል፣ ሳልፈር አለ፣ አይቨርሜክቲን አለ። በእነዚህ መድኃኒቶች እንደ እድሜያቸው እና እንደ መድኃኒት ሴፍ እንደ ሁኔታው ህክምና ይሰጣል ማለት ነው።
ኋላ ስነድ ግን ይተላለፋል የበሽታ ኑ ይዛችኋቸው ኑ ተባል። እኛም ተረዳን። እኛ ስንድን የውዜው ቤተሰቦችን ደግሞ እንድትልካቸው ተባል። ማታ ጊዜ ህፃኗም ታማ ነበር ተቀርጻለች ምትታየናት ያቺ ማህሪች የው የሚቀባ ብትቀባ ኖርማል ሆኖ አሁን ኖርማል ሆነና
የሚቀባ መድኃኒት ጤና ጣቢያዎች ሰጠውት። ያን መድኃኒት ያው በደንብ ልብሱ ታጥቦ ሰውነቱን በደንብ ታጥቦ መቀባት አለበት አሉ። በቃ ያንን ልብሱ ሁላ የታጠበ ኩታ ነበር፣ አዲስ ኩታ። ያንን ሰውነት ውልቅ አድርገን አጥበን ማታ ያን ቀብተነው አደርን።
እና አሁን ድነናል፣ ኖርማል ሆነናል። አሁን እኛ እያመሰገን ነው። ይሄ ጤና መድን በጣም ትልቅ ተስፋ አለው እያልሁ ማስረዳ እኔ ማስተማር የምችል ነው።